Hello, this is your host, Liz Lawless for Wild West Diversity, where we tell the rarely and untold stories of multicultural contributions to the settling of the American Wild West. Here we tell you about people from the 1800s, 1718, 1900s. We also share living legends. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be talking to a living legend, Garrett Scouten. He is with Ag Trust Farm Credit. And we want you to know about the opportunities for you if you're looking at farm or ranch land or equipment. How do you get funding for something like that? So, Garrett, welcome to the show. So glad to have you today.
Thank you, Liz. It's great to be here.
All right. So Ag Trust is a farm credit co-op, basically, right? And y'all have, I think, what, about 19 offices around in Texas and New Mexico? Is that correct?
We do. Yes, ma'am. We have 19 different locations across Texas and New Mexico, and we cover 81 counties.
Okay, great. Because our listeners and our viewers, and basically people are watching this on the live stream, and then we pull this down as a podcast. So occasionally I might spell something. That's because somebody that's just listening won't see that. Like I'll give them toward the end the website and where they can get information, more information, and stuff like that. But why don't you tell us a little bit? How did you get into this part of the business?
Yeah, you betcha. And I'll back up just a little bit if
Okay.
it's okay,
Yeah,
Liz.
no problem.
I do. I have a background in agriculture, so I grew up in ag. My grandparents were from Holland, and so they immigrated across, and they ended up in California, and they ended up in the dairy business.
Okay.
And so my dad ended up with 15 brothers and sisters, and it was they were all the all the dairy hands,
All
and
right.
dad grew up in the day when he milked by hand, and
Yep.
he
Uh-huh.
had some pretty wild stories. But most of the brothers and sisters grew up in agriculture, and they had dairies of their own when they grew up. And that's where I was fortunate that I was able to grow up on a dairy. And so
Mhm.
I had this passion for agriculture. And so this ended up becoming just a natural fit for me,
Uh-huh.
is what happened. I worked full time with my parents growing up on the dairy from a young age. And then when I graduated high school, I went to a local university here in Stephenville called Tarleton State University
Sure. Sure.
and
Biggest
received.
rodeo capital of the world.
It is.
College rodeo capital of the world.
That's right. We've got a phenomenal team, and I think we're home to the most professional rodeos as well
Right.
too.
That's right.
Cowboys and cowgirls. But went to Tarleton, got my degree in accounting and master's in business,
Okay.
and had a few other stints around. But Farm Credit Bank, Lone Star Ag Credit, came knocking on my door one day, and it was in 2007. I was looking for a career change, and we were actually about to end up maybe moving states. But anyway, the opportunity came knocking, and it was a perfect fit for me. So here I am 17 years later. So
I
even
love
though
it.
I'm not out milking cows, I get
Right.
to live out agriculture right here in what I do every day.
Right. Every day. Every day. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about what should somebody be looking for when they're looking for a ranch or a farm or a property, or even I think y'all do recreational property too. But
We do.
yeah, so I'm assuming that's something maybe like a game type thing or a hunting lease or something, some
Yes,
other
ma'am.
things like that, or environmental ranching is what we call it, I guess, in the off season when.
Right. Oh yeah, and you're right. And recreation can go so many different ways. We have some customers, they want the property to go hunt on. We have others, their recreation is they want to go out and just watch the wildlife
Right.
is what they want to do,
Yep.
as well too. But so I guess kind of going back to where does the journey start? How do you? To me, I think that's the fun part of the
Uh-huh.
process, right there. I think that process for a lot of people starts by driving around.
Yeah.
And especially that happened back during COVID when everybody was confined up. They wanted their place out in the country, and
Right.
everybody's like, "We got to get out of here. We
Right. We
need
got to get away
space."
from people. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And some of it was we just needed away from our family. The kids are
Right.
driving me nuts. But so, hopping in the car and then driving through an area and just looking at the countryside and then
Yeah.
figuring out like, oh, this is a pretty place, and just that dreaming process.
Yeah.
And then I think in today's day, everything's just a click away. And
Yeah. You
so
can look it
there
up.
is a very good resource out there, Liz, that's called land.com. It used to be
Okay.
Lands of Texas.
Right.
And
Uh-huh.
so I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a very simple website, land.com. You go in
Mhm.
and you can type in what county you're looking for.
Looking for 'em.
And then you can go through and you can sort it by acreage size. You could sort it by price if you want to.
Mhm.
The other item that I think is pretty neat about it is you can set notifications. So
Uh,
if you know there's a certain county you want to
you
end
want
up
to hear?
in and you want to
Right.
be the first to know when things are hitting, you can
Yeah.
set up a notification and then you can receive those emails that, hey, new property on the
And
market.
yeah, there's a property available. Great, great. Yeah, that's fabulous. Okay, so land.com. So look for that if you're listening online or to the podcast instead of the live stream. It's just land.com,
Yes,
and you can find some properties put in your county. That's great. That's great information to share with our listeners and our viewers.
you bet. I think there's one more area that I would recommend too, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would highly recommend as well too using a local real estate agent is what I would
Mhm.
recommend. And
Mhm.
to me, the importance behind that is I look at those farm and ranch real estate agents as experts in the
Right.
market. And so if you talk to them about what you're looking for, and at that point, they can guide you,
Right.
to the different part of the county,
Mhm.
or you name it. And then they can have their ears open as well too for properties that are becoming that come
They
available.
become available. Yeah, and you really need a farm and ranch realtor too. It's interesting. We talked about a couple of weeks ago to Redfin, which is one of the national real estate companies with about 2,000 realtors, and we had about 50 in the room. We were talking about Black history and Black cowboy history and
Mhm.
stuff, but I said, two or three of y'all need to go out and become farm and ranch. That's how you can help. Okay, people, you can go out and become a farm and ranch realtor instead of just a residential realtor because it's a different process, I think, don't you?
I do think it's a different process. That's right.
Yeah.
And it's just so different. If you look at houses and you show houses for a living versus if you show a ranch, you may drive out in the field and think that's grass, but it's really weeds that are growing. So you want you want somebody, that knows,
Right. Yeah, that understands what
that
the
understands
property.
the land.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
right.
understands land. Yeah, natural grasses and water and resources and all of that kind of stuff for sure, for
Yes,
sure.
ma'am.
Well, I think that that's a part of the process too. It's really hard, not maybe not hard, but difficult for people to go and get a mortgage or get an opportunity to fund their dream. And how did you do that? And so that's why operations like y'all's Ag Trust Credit, Farm Credit, I think could be really valuable for people. So can you kind of step us through what's the y'all's process? How does somebody get in touch with you?
Sure.
What are y'all looking for as far as, the initial steps and what's that process like for somebody who
You you bet, Liz. And you're right. It's and not every bank wants to deal in farm and ranch, and that's
yeah,
another. That's why we're a
yeah,
niche market right here.
right.
Why we were created, going way back to 1916. But so typically, what will happen is when a customer locates their piece of property. There's a couple things. I'm going to back up here a second.
Okay.
A lot
Yeah,
of times on the front side, customers want to know, can we afford this piece of property?
right.
And so we can help them in that process through what we call the pre-qualification process.
Uh-huh.
And so, just through a little bit of dialogue, whether we take it over the phone or we send emails back and forth, we can grab just some stated information. How much do you make? What other debts do you have? What's the property you're looking at?
Mhm.
Things like that. What are your credit scores? And then from there, if everything looks good and we can check the box, then we can say, okay, here's a prequel, so they have some assurance that,
Yeah.
hey, we're not just wasting our time when we're out
Right.
looking at property.
Yeah.
So So I do think that that is a good first step.
Yeah,
Um,
I
a
think so
lot of
too.
a lot of the agents require it nowadays as well too, because they want to make sure they're not just working with a tire kicker.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, because this kind of property for the most part may in some cases be, a bigger nugget. It may be a bigger cost than just a normal residential or um, property. And so, and like you say, it has different, parameters too, I'm sure, as far as
Mhm.
looking at pricing and looking at, appraisals and, all of those kinds of things. Does all of that kind of still have to be done, or that just comes through the process of working through the paperwork?
It does have to be done, and it is
Mhm.
completed through that process of the paperwork. So that's a
Yeah.
great leadway kind of into the next part of the process, Liz. So let's say once they have their pre-qual, they find a piece of property, and the property is under contract. So buyer and seller have executed a contract.
Hmm.
Then at that point, we jump back into the game.
Yeah.
And so now at this point, we move forward with a loan application. So customer goes through, they fill out a loan application, and then when they turn their loan application in, depending on the size of the request, depends
Hmm.
on how much information has to be returned back with it. But usually customers will return back like a checking account or savings saying, hey, here's where my down
Right.
payment's coming from, or,
Right.
here's a pay stub, here's my latest tax return, things like that. And
Yeah.
so when we have that info, we move it into what we call credit underwriting.
Hmm.
And so we're actually going through that process, seeing if do these individuals qualify for the loan
Right.
is what we're doing.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
when they qualify, we then talk to the customer. Hey, you guys are approved. We provide them with a written formal approval saying, hey, this
Hmm.
is now contingent upon appraisal, upon title work. And then
Right.
that's where we begin those other things like you were referring to, Liz.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Because yeah, like you say, you got to have clear title and things like that. Be sure you're not being taken advantage of, and so and the person looking
Right.
at the property is not being taken advantage of too. So, well, that's great, and that's it. Because people just don't really know what the process is. So I appreciate you walking kind of through that thing. And so once a person they find that property, they have that dream. Yeah, that's the thing. People have the dream to either have a farm or have a ranch, and maybe they have ancestors that grew up there, or maybe they grew up, or maybe it was their great grandparents. We're finding a lot, especially minorities, wanting to go back to farming and ranching. It's kind of interesting. We're far enough away, so many years away. Like my mother's generation, they didn't want to go back. I mean, like my
Right.
my godmother grew up on a farm down in East Texas, and she didn't have any interest in going back and working. But now the kids and the grandkids, they are interested because they have that in their DNA. They have that willingness to want to be around the land or be around animals, and
Yes.
and it's different for different folks. But yeah, so we hope that our listeners and our viewers that if you're looking and you're dreaming about owning a farm or a ranch, that you'll consider finding that realtor that has some expertise in that area. But then that now you can come to Ag Trust and work through that process through their 19 office locations, and we'll post that in the comments and in the description so that you'll know how to do that. But again, you can always go to their website at www.agtrustaca.com. So agtrustaca.com. If you're listening on our podcast, write that down and take note of that, especially if you have a dream to someday own a farm or a ranch, or maybe you're looking at property right now. So you can go to land.com and check out some of the properties that are available in the county or the area where you'd like to move to. And I have some friends that just bought, 10 acres down there in Stephenville, and they're building they're building the Edwards compound. They have mom and dad, they got, a daughter that's married, and they got a son that's married. And so they're building actually three houses on their property down
Wow.
there in Stephenville. They just retired here up here in Dallas, and so they've been scouting it out. But the son, Denton, is a team roper, and so
Yeah.
he, he's going to a lot of rodeos, and I think he feels like, well, he's right there in the middle of all of it. And he can go any direction he wants
That's right.
and get
That's
to a
right.
rodeo. So, well, tell us a little bit more about Ag Trust. And I know y'all recently, I guess, had a merger. It was Lone Star Ag Credit, and Lone Star has been a sponsor for the rodeo for many years. Our Cowboys of Color rodeo. So we certainly appreciate Lydia Lasky on your team, and she's been our kind of connection, and she's always been great to work with. And it's just fun to work with somebody that understands the business, that knows, like not all of our sponsors really understand, horses and cattle and bulls and, what it takes,
Right.
to manage, and the investment, the amount of money that's invested is, sometimes it can be significant. So you want to plan, you want to start putting that deposit together, you want to start putting that money in an account.
Yes,
So
yeah, start saving those pennies. That's
start
right.
saving your pennies.
That's right.
But tell us a little bit more. You got a few more minutes here, but what else would you think people need to know when they're looking at that farmer ranch or recreational property,
You
even?
bet, you bet. There are a couple things, and I'm going to touch on one other thing real quick too, Liz, and I'm going to touch on what you were just referring to as well. But one thing I want to go back and follow up on is, we get a lot of questions talking. I'll tell you the 3-4 common questions that I usually get when I talk to a customer is going to be like, what kind of down payment are we
Right.
looking at? What kind of loan terms, are possible? What are we looking at on an interest rate? What type of fees? What does the timing look like? So I guess it's really
Yeah.
5. I keep growing.
Right.
If I talk any longer, I may have 6.
That's okay.
But so typically, from a down payment standpoint, you're usually looking at a 20% down payment amount.
Okay.
The final loan amount is going to be based off, let's say, if we do offer up what we would call an 80% loan to value, customers putting in 20%, we loan off the lesser of the purchase price or the appraised value of the property is how that works.
Okay.
And then getting into loan terms, typical loan terms are 20 years are typical. We can go out to 30, and we can definitely go shorter. We could go down to 5 years as well too.
Right.
Really, it goes back to the property, it goes back to the finances of the individual. All those types of things dictate where you
Right.
end up.
Where you're going to end up.
Yes, ma'am. Rates, of course, that's the big sticker shock right now for everybody. And what's the Fed going to do this year? Rates right now on land are running in the high 8s is where that's at.
Right.
And there's a difference. We get this a lot too. Like, why is there a difference between a farm and ranch interest rate
Right.
and a residential? And it's not comparing apples to apples.
Yeah.
And one way I had it explained to me was that the risk level is different. So when it hits the fan, you're going to pay the bill that protects your head, your house. And if your land is not that, then you'll let that one go. And so there's a risk difference between them, and that drives that. And then fees, that's kind of a natural process of every loan. Typical fees, you're looking at 1% origination fee, appraisal fee, and a couple of other small items as well too.
Right. Yeah, like you say, that you have in everything that you do. So
Right.
Great. And then and is there any penalty for paying down early?
It depends what kind of product you take.
Oh, it depends on what kind of product. Okay.
It does.
That makes sense. Okay.
It does. Yeah. So we have so many different products that we can offer. Some have no prepayment. Some do have a prepayment.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. Great. So if somebody wants to get in touch, they can just go to any of the county offices. You're specifically over Stephenville and Cleburne. Is that right?
Yes,
so a lot of our listeners will be in this Dallas-Fort Worth area, just because we've been in this market ourselves for a rodeo, and we'll be posting our social media, and we have about 7,000 or 8,000 people that are Cowboys of Color fans, and so those are our farm and ranch people. Those are our contestants. Those are our people that either maybe they already have a property, or they're looking to expand their property, or they're looking to buy a property. Do you do any equipment? type
We,
loans for like barns or I don't know, guess what, tractors or
yes, ma'am. Yes,
balers, hay
yeah,
balers.
we can handle it all. We're not going to do a butterfly loan or something like
Right,
that.
right.
Yeah, but yeah,
No,
and
no releasing wild butterflies onto
right,
the
right. They're
property just
yeah,
for
they're hard to
bird
count.
watchers. Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
but we do. So I like to think of us as a one stop shop.
Yeah.
I've had several customers over my career where we start with the piece of land, and
Uh-huh.
then they figure out how great it is to be out in the country. So then they say, well, Garrett, we want to build a barn. So
Yeah.
then we build the barn. And then they come back and they're like, you know what? We are going to sell our house in the city and we want to build our house.
Right.
So then we build the house out there. So we've done that whole process. And then it's, hey, we need the cows out here. We need a tractor
Right.
and on down the list. But we do, Liz, we handle that whole side as well too. And I think that's what makes us
Okay.
special
Right. Me
because
too.
everybody that works for us typically grew up on a farm or is still involved in agriculture. So my
Right.
wife and I,
Right.
we run some cows. We have a cow calf operation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm in tune with the market. We have guys out in our West Texas office and they're involved in row crop with cotton. And so anyway, that's neat. So we understand what we finance and
Right.
uh, we finance a lot of different products.
Right. Okay. Well, fabulous. Well, I think this has been very interesting. I appreciate y'all so much coming on and talking to us about these opportunities because I don't think it's something people hear a lot. And so we'll be, this will be airing on our show here, and then it'll get archived to our YouTube channel, so it'll always be available. We'll be sure that we make the links available to you as well because you may have customers or people,
That'd be great.
because I'm sure you get the same questions over and over and over again, and you can say, "Hey, just go watch the video.
Absolutely. Right.
I just told Liz all the answers to all those questions." So, yeah, so that'll be great. So it's www.agtrustaca.com. It's Garrett Scouten.
You got it.
And Garrett's at the Stephenville and the Cleburne office if you want to get in touch with him directly. But you can also go to the website and find the other locations that might be closer to you. And anybody in any of those locations is going to be happy to help you and talk to you about your dream of owning a farm or ranch or a recreation facility, facility property, not facility. And then, like you say, if you want to build something else on that property once you have the land, they can assist you with that as well. So, Garrett, I guess we got about a minute left here. What's maybe one last thing that you would want to share with people, either about just about farm and ranch and agriculture or the lifestyle, or about the company?
Real quick about the company, it's a phenomenal company. I love this place. I've worked here 17 years, but I think for the customer, we take really good care of our customers, and we pride ourselves in that. And being a co-op, we have what we call a patronage dividend, where our board elects to share earnings of the bank with our stockholders, and never a guarantee, but a good history. And it's a good way for the customer to reduce their cost of borrowing. And anyway, I'm just blessed to get to do what
Get
I
to
do.
do what you're doing. Yeah, yeah. Enjoy it and be able, like you say, to run both sides of the operation, the number side of it and the hands-on side of it of working with cattle. And I'm sure y'all have horses and other stuff too. But well, thank you so much for being here. This is your host, Liz Lawless with Wild West Diversity, where we tell the rarely and untold stories of multicultural contributions. And as Garrett and I talked about, my family was Swedish. My grandfather had 13 in his family. They came in and went up to Kansas, and so we're all this mixed culture, and we're in this together. So find good people like Ag Trust companies that will support you in your dreams. And come back here any Thursday at 5 p.m. or go back to our YouTube channel at Wild West Diversity and see these wonderful episodes. So we'll see you on the trail. Thanks so much.